You have to know, you have to be able to look at your players objectively, take a step back and look at their history, look at what their overall health and well-being is, and what that projects. Does that project into another 3-year contract? Do you think they could sustain for 3 more? Do you think they could only maybe have a 1-year contract and see how it goes after that? So all those things came into discussion, and you could only give your best opinion on where they were from a medical and developmental perspective in terms of their performance at that time.
Hello, and welcome back to the LFA Purpose Podcast, where we offer fresh insights to help you rediscover the clarity and courage that already live within you. I'm your host, Father Leo Armbrust, and in each episode, we explore what it means to live a life of purpose by listening to people who are actually living theirs. Today's conversation is a continuation of our last episode with Kevin O'Neill, an athletic trainer who has worked with athletes in both the NFL and the NCAA. In this episode, we talk about not only the physical demands athletes endure, but also the emotional pressures of performance, identity, and expectation, and how these battles shape who they become on and off the field. Kevin, we spent the last time in the podcast talking about how you got in your career as a trainer and some of the stops that you've made along your way, starting at Penn Hills High School and then going on to Tennessee and Pittsburgh, Arizona, and Oregon State, and then later at UCF and the University of Miami, the Dallas Cowboys, and then your next stop was at the Miami Dolphins, and you came with Jimmy back together in that relationship as a staff member when he unretired, became the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, succeeding Don Shula, and you left the Cowboys where you had been for 7 years, and you're rejoining him. This was coming back home for you in some ways because you and Ann and the girls had lived in Miami, and now you're coming back to South Florida. What was that experience like?
Well, when you look at the NFL, one of the big things that happened during my time in the NFL, especially late 80s, was the advent of free agency. And when you were a player that became a free agent and multiple people wanted a chance to hire you, you usually ended up making some more money. Don't you know, one time I got to be a free agent. And
that's a good way to put it, Kevin.
I got to go to the Miami Dolphins and got to make some more money thanks to my mentor, my friend, and my boss at the time, Jimmy Johnson. We had a very valuable interpersonal relationship, and we just really changed a lot of ideas, exchanged a lot of things that helped us grow our program in Dallas and carried that over to Miami.
So people need to understand, one of the main reasons I was with the Dallas Cowboys is because of you and Jimmy.
Right.
And so when the first Super Bowl was played out in Pasadena, I go out and do Mass and Chapel with the Cowboys, and we win the Super Bowl. And the next year, back to back now, we're in Georgia at the Georgia Dome, once again playing the Buffalo Bills. And for the second year in a row, back to back, win a Super Bowl. So I only went just a few times after Jimmy left back to the Cowboys to visit you and do Mass and Chapel with the Cowboys.
Right.
Jimmy was retired, living in the Keys. I am still with the University of Miami, and I was there for 13 seasons. Sure enough, in 1996, when Jimmy comes back to the Miami Dolphins, and you come with him, guess who makes the decision to leave the University of Miami and join the Miami Dolphins? Me.
Right.
And so now the three of us are back working together, and we're with the Dolphins. And I got to tell you, rejoining you and working with both of you and the other staff members was one of the real joys of my life. But on the different level, as compared to when it was just collegiate football, compared to professional football, it's a whole different mentality. It's a whole different group of guys that you're working with on many different levels. Why don't you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I think, you have to look a little bit at your rosters. When I went to Dallas my first year, there were 2 players on the team that were my age, 35 years old.
Oh, wow.
and one of them was born the same year, same day as me. God rest his soul, Tom Rafferty.
Oh my!
And
played offensive lineman there.
And he, played at Penn State and was a Maryland kid, but he, came up as a rough and tumble guy, and Ed Too Tall Jones was the other one that was a year older than me or so, and they both were with us that first year, and then matriculated out of there by year 2. I think that when you look at how long some of those players are with their individual teams, you get to know them better than the 4-year college player. Well, today's college players, they may be at 4 schools in 4 years, but back then, you're used to having a guy 4 to 5 years.
True.
Now, I think I had Jason Taylor, I think 14 out of his 16 years he played or whatever, and so I had him for quite a long time. You get to know them personally, you get to know their families, you get to know their injury history, how they perform, what buttons to push. All those things make a difference in terms of how you care for a guy or treat a guy.
One of the reasons we have gotten to be the close friends that we are is because you always entrusted me with some information that I could have access to a player that I could be able to sit down with and have a discussion or a conversation with on a deeply personal level. And whether it was the player individually or a family-related matter, and instances that you and I have both had in our relationship and working where we were, is the sad, unfortunate experience of having to tell someone that someone in their lives has just died.
You had to have those types of conversations, and the pain and the way that, you're giving information is so delicate, and you're trying to be just doing it in the easiest way you can, but there's no easy way.
Much like you had to share information with a particular athlete that they had something physically wrong with them.
Sure.
That now had to be addressed.
And as the athletic trainer, you don't just get all the injury information. Hey, it's medical, so you had drug testing, and so you had other things, and I had made it possible in the NFL for a player, if they wanted to have an HIV test at the time of their annual physical, they could get one. Well, don't you know, we had multiple occasions where we had positive tests. And so you get your team physician to come out and meet with that person, and then one of the first things the team physician did was say, you have to tell one of the people on the athletic training staff, and you have to know that if you have a cut or if you have a problem or if something's going on, you're going to go only to that person. And so I served as that person for multiple players, and those were difficult times. I mean, HIV's probably managed a lot more differently these days with some of the scientific advances, but at that time, it was like, I don't know, having leprosy.
And, I would really like to emphasize that, especially with you individually and your profession, it's not just so much, as I keep saying, treating the individual. It's treating all the people in that circle or sphere of people that individual encounters with or relates to on a daily basis. Not only that, but you're dealing with, like I said, the whole person. You're dealing with everything. You have to get as much information about that individual as possible, not just the drug testing, not just what their most recent blood test revealed or the regular physical exam that's taken place each year. That's a constant ongoing thing that happens every day when you put a premium on the health, the physicality of an athlete.
Well, they're given assigned weights. They're given, now
they have dietitians.
Right.
They got,
nutritionists for every team, dealing with the players on specific menu things for them to help them try to improve their performance through nutrition.
And what's legal. Performance enhancement.
That's from doing it just from sound nutritional levels and not 1,000 different types of supplements that may be laced with who knows what.
Correct.
So,
and one of the things you had to be absolutely familiar with was what the NFL regulated in terms of all of that they could put into their bodies and what was absolutely forbidden.
And, what it came down to, and still is today, is the player's responsible for what he puts in his body. So if somebody says, well, this is going to help you get your knee better faster, and you take some steroids that you don't know are steroids, you're still going to be held accountable for it.
Correct.
And you're not going to be allowed to play. And so there's an educational course of, each year your new players come in and you indoctrinate them into trying to understand how all of that works.
So you have found a relationship with a player who comes into your care, into your responsibility. When you get them who come into you as a professional or even as an amateur, and you adopt a relationship with them and you formulate one that's of trust and respect, that's mutual. At some point, you have to tell them that, or may advise them that their career is coming to an end or it's over. How did you do that?
Well, I think that there's multiple ways that some of those things affect careers. Sometimes it's a substantial injury. Sometimes it's just a significant drop in their performance. Age catches up and they don't run as fast, or they don't jump as high, or they don't do things as well as they did when they first started to play. And so communicating those in a professional manner and saying these are things that are concerns. Some of it comes from maybe the athletic trainers or maybe a strength coach, but some of it may come from a position coach or the head coach saying, we're not seeing what we saw before, and we're going to draw this down. This is going to come to an end. Those are hard days.
I think your role is more vast and in a variety of ways than people ever imagine. Especially not only particularly with your own individual personal assets and gifts and skills, but also what Coach Jimmy Johnson entrusted you to, not from the standpoint of advice and knowledge and all the things that helped you not only become a better trainer, but a resource for him about the entirety of everything that was going on in the organization. Literally, and I could be just saying this in a way that's, you had to have your finger on the pulse.
Had to. You have to know, you have to be able to look at your players objectively, take a step back and look at their history, look at what their overall health and well-being is, and what that projects. Does that project into another 3-year contract? Do you think they could sustain for 3 more? Do you think they could only maybe have a 1-year contract and see how it goes after that? So all those things came into discussion, and you could only give your best opinion on where they were from a medical and developmental perspective in terms of their performance at that time.
I went to the University of Miami to get my 3rd master's degree, and it was a course in administration and supervision. One of the gifts I have always looked up to you and admired you for possessing is your ability to handle personnel issues. And for that reason, the United States Football League, or the UFL, what also called upon you for your resources and your insight and leadership. Tell me how you got that gift of dealing with people in difficult personnel situations, whether it was staff, whether it was players, whatever it was. You have been called upon, I know, many times to come into a situation for suggestions, ideas, or recommendations to remedy it.
Well, I think that, it starts with how you treat people. So, when I left the Miami Dolphins and started to look around for another job, I ended up going to work for one of my former student athletic trainers, who was the senior assistant athletic director at FIU, who oversaw the athletic training area. And so I told a lot of people, be careful how you treat your students. You may work for them one day.
Isn't that interesting?
And I did. Well, in a similar way, I had one of my former players from the Cowboys call me after I had left FIU and thought I was retired. And he called and said, hey, is there any chance you'd consider coming to work for me in Birmingham for about 10, 12 weeks? I just need you for 10 to 12 weeks.
Now, this is for the UFL.
This is for the USFL.
Oh, USFL. Okay.
And the player's name was Daryl Johnston, one of my players, Moose from the Cowboys, who was a great player there. And I said, sure, I'll talk to the boss about it. And she said, you better go. And so I drove up there, and I get there, and he says, yeah, we got a couple issues. One is somebody made a mistake in our payroll and was paying them overtime, and they got to stop that. Not very smart. And number two, we're only going to have 2 for each team, and we thought we might have more, but the very first night I'm there, I'm like, okay, did every one of you sign? You signed an offer letter when you came, and the offer letter was for X amount of money. Correct. I said, well, every one of you is going to make over that amount because you've already been paid overtime for, almost 2/3 of the season. But that's going to come to an end now. And that's not me coming in the door saying that. That's me being charged with communicating that to you here in my very first meeting so that you guys can love me.
They didn't shoot the messenger, did they?
And so, we got down to brass tacks and saying, everyone sign something. And that's what you're going to make from here on out. No one's going to penalize you for the additional money you've made, but you're just going to go back to making that over the last 4 weeks of the season.
So your skills have always transcended being in the basement somewhere with no windows, taping ankles, right, as you often say.
Well, and so, that was, kind of how am I going to manage this one? But that was the best I could come up with on short course, and it worked, and we talked through it, and over the course of the number of weeks that we had left and on into the playoffs and on into the championship, I got to know a lot of the people that I was working with there much better. But that first night, it was tough on all of them. It wasn't easy on me either. But you don't call you in to fix things because there's no problems. They call you in to fix things because there are problems.
That sounds like Pittsburgh logic.
And that's, kind of when you have to sit back and look and say, this is how we're going to have to talk about this up front, and then we'll see what remedies we can come up with.
Why don't you tell the audience how many awards and honors you have received both on the collegiate level and in the NFL for your service as a trainer, and also how many times you've gone around the country giving talks on exactly what we're discussing today.
I'm not big on talking about that.
I know you're not.
So
that's why I'm bringing it up.
I'm really not going to go into that. I think that, everyone that works towards excelling in their field has periods when they get recognized. And I was fortunate enough to be recognized a few times. And,
NFL Trainer of the Year?
Yes, I have been.
How many times?
Once is enough. Yep. And so, you do the best you can with the time you have, and you try to work with your peers from the other teams because, look, we're all trading players. They're all coming back and forth. So you have to be honest in terms of saying this guy has this or this guy has that or this guy's a challenge. And, every team makes their own decisions.
So the trainers do talk to each other,
sure,
exchanging information about players.
Sure. And, sometimes you help someone out that might not realize that they've made an error. I had a young guy that just became the head athletic trainer for another team, and I knew him when he was an assistant for a number of years. And so we brought a player in from the CFL, and the player's dad was a physician, but the player wasn't honest with us. And we found out through doing his labs that he had early phase renal failure. So we didn't pass him, we didn't sign him. And he went to another team 2 days later and got signed. And I called the guy and I said, hey, why don't you send me a HIPAA release requesting his records, and I'll share them with you. He said, okay. And I did. And he had to go up to his management and say, we didn't do blood tests. We just did an orthopedic exam, and we got these because we knew we could get them from over here, and well, there's a problem.
And he had renal failure.
And the kid didn't get to have that contract that he signed because he wasn't honest with them. And that's part of the collective bargaining agreement is you have to be honest up front with the team you go to.
I don't think people always appreciate how the National Football League is a business. And the business is having the best parts available. And those parts have to be constantly put in a situation where they excel. And if you don't know what you're investing in, you could be making a huge mistake.
I can't tell you the number of athletic trainers that maybe weren't as attentive to detail on some of these things, and it cost them their job.
That's unfortunate.
But I would call that combine and the gathering of pre-draft information my annual science fair project that you cannot fail. Or you fail, you're out. And so that's what I termed it to my assistants every year, and every year we dove into it, and I felt like we had the best information you could have coming in.
And surrounded by all those medical professionals, as well as the coaches and the scouts, and you've got people that have been involved in doing background checks on players and so forth. There's not an area of a potential draft choice that isn't explored, researched, investigated, every aspect.
Yeah, I think that, we probably weren't as good on dental as we should have been with some of them, but when you go to the combine, you're not necessarily looking at dentistry, but by God, we got vision, we got everything else but. And if there's a problem and you plow it up, you better know the answers to what you're going to have to do to try to fix it if that's a guy they want.
So anybody that's out there listening, thinking about being a physical therapist or a trainer, it can be very demanding, but it can be incredibly rewarding because, as you've articulated, you've helped save people's lives from what you've discovered or the way you've presented them with a circumstance or a situation that they were completely unaware of, that now became something that could have been worse, but you prevented it from becoming a bigger problem.
It became a life-changing issue for them. Yes. And
exactly.
Yeah, I think that everyone that's in a healthcare type of job, has to be more of a giver than a taker,
a healer.
And, you care for the people, you give of yourself to help them become healthy and whole again and to compete at their best level, at least in the sports part of it. But in the regular everyday person, it could be just having a healthy enough life to continue your career at whatever it is and be able to work and do the things that provide for your family.
And Kevin, I really want to reemphasize what you have shared with us about how you continue to be a resource for so many people who you have walked with or crossed paths with over the years, who have called you up for a recommendation or a thought or a suggestion or an idea about anything that not only pertains to them individually, but maybe a family member, a relative or friend that you happen to know and you were able to give the information they were looking for.
Well, I think, when you look at life as a whole, it's about relationships. It's about relationships with your coaches, with your athletes, with your administrators, with your team priest. It's about building relationships. And those relationships don't end the minute you walk away from the organization. If you've had a very solid relationship with an individual, it's likely they may reach out to you and say, hey, I'm now at another team. I got this problem. What do you think about it? Or, I'll give you a story. We had an agent call me, and he said, hey, my client has a football injury, but he's an NBA player. I need you to look at him for me. I said, I'll do it as long as the head athletic trainer for the NBA team is on board with me doing it.
So you were always respectful of the lines and boundaries of another
And that's how
trainer.
I got to meet Shaquille O'Neal. We're not related.
I see. No, he's a little bit taller.
But we did work with him when he had a significant injury, and their athletic trainer was very appreciative of us making the call, making sure he was in the loop, and then knowing what we told him to do to help with it.
The fraternity of trainers is not relegated or limited to one particular sport. It's universal to all sports.
It's crazy. I was at Oregon State University, my first job as a head athletic trainer, and at Portland State University, Gary Vitti was there. and he went on to be the Lakers athletic trainer through 7 championships, I think. But we got to know each other well way back then. And then at the University of Portland at the time was Ron, who became the head athletic trainer for the Heat when I was there, Ron Culp.
Yeah, Ron Culp.
And so here we were at 3 schools in the state of Oregon, and then we ended up with 3 pretty big jobs down the road. And, knowing those guys and being able to communicate with them, that's all good stuff.
And I was blessed when I was at the University of Miami. I was given a shirt one day that said Father Leo, and underneath it said medical team. And I would like to share with our audience that the group and the friendship that I was able to form with people like Dr. John Cuneo, one of the most respected doctors in South Miami and South Florida. He was the former chief of staff at Mercy Hospital. He was the first person to bring renal dialysis network to Miami in 1968. He was my roommate, and God rest his soul. Dr. Richard Mariani, the team dentist. He was the team dentist for the University of Miami for well over 50 years.
Right.
And now his son Chris is the orthodontist.
Right.
And of course, the rather famous and well-known and highly respected orthopedic surgeon, Dr. John Uribe. He's with Baptist Health South now. He's the head orthopedic surgeon for the Miami Dolphins, and he's also with the Florida Panthers. And all those people remain close friends of yours and mine because of what we developed in the friendship and taking care of those people that were in our charge.
Right. And that's, again, like I said, it's developing relationships. And, the people that are most successful in life are the ones that I think develop the skills to create positive relationships with the many, many people you run across on a daily basis. And if you can build those types of relationships, it carries you so much further.
Kevin, we started this LFA Purpose in September, and you are the 4th guest that we've had on our podcast. Our first guest was Dr. Adam Iglesias, a psychologist. Our second guest was Father Mario Castaneda, a Catholic priest and pastor of St. Rita's in Wellington. Our third guest was Dr. Stuart Fox. He is a highly esteemed veterinarian. He's taken care of all of my dogs. I'm privileged to have you sit here with me and share some of the thoughts and memories that we have had together. The University of Miami, the Dallas Cowboys, Miami Dolphins, and now the friendship we have today. Thank you, Kevin O'Neill. You're a friend. God bless.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Leo.